All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. It is time for our mailbag. Not on Friday, like it usually is, because I'm headed out of town. I'm not even sure which day this is going to post, but a bunch of you guys dropped a bunch of good mailbag questions in our YouTube comments over the course of the last week. Remember, if you want to get questions in the YouTube comments, I go to our full episodes over the course of the previous week, and I just look for anybody who writes mailbag : and I'm going to read what that says, and I'm going to accumulate a bunch of them together and put together a mailbag for our shows on Friday throughout the season. So make sure you keep dropping those mailbag questions. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. We also have new social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Follow the Hoops Tonight channel there so you guys can see more of our content throughout the season. And like I mentioned off the top, keep dropping those mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. All right, let's talk some basketball. So this first question is not even a question, it's just a comment, but it captured a feeling that I had last night. I'm recording this on Saturday. But on Friday night when I was watching all of the great hoops around the league, this comment said, "Dude, screw the media. The NBA is sick. So many good teams, real juggernauts in both conferences, and real threats to the juggernauts right behind them. It's such good drama." I totally agree. I thought the same thing when I was watching last night. I sent out a tweet somewhere along the same effect where I said, the Boston kind of like at least trying to trick us into thinking that they're relaxing a bit this season, as they've been, pretty far behind Cleveland throughout the regular season in the standings. Boston trying to trick us on that front. And again, I say trick because I still feel like Boston is a decent chunk ahead of everybody in the league in terms of two-way versatility in the playoffs, meaning the different things that they can do to account for different types of matchups on offense and on defense to give them the best chance of weathering the storm through 4 playoff rounds. So, I still view Boston as the best team in the league, but they're at least trying to trick us into thinking that they're not as sharp as they were last year. One of the weird things about this recent stretch for Boston is they'll have incredibly dominant performances mixed in as they decide on that particular night to really push their foot down on the gas pedal, and they can do some real damage to these teams. But anyway, we've seen a bunch of peaks, right? Like Milwaukee bouncing back from their bad start, going on that massive win streak, and then winning the in-season tournament, including a pretty dominant, impressive effort against the Oklahoma City Thunder in the in-season tournament championship game. I know Bucks fans are pretty down on themselves right now. I would tell you from experience, having rooted for a Lakers team that experienced a similar lull after winning the in-season tournament last year, every team in the league has lulls. We've been talking about this a lot, especially in the Western Conference, but it seems to be a recurring theme that the team that gets to hoist a trophy kind of in the middle of the first third of the regular season has a hard time getting up for games in the few weeks after that. The Lakers did snap out of it about a month later and played really good basketball the rest of the season. That's what I expect the Bucks to do. I view them as you put in the comment, as a real threat to the juggernauts. To me, there's the 3 juggernauts, right? It's like Boston, Cleveland, and Oklahoma City, but then there are like a bunch of real threats, right? We know Oklahoma City's a threat. Cleveland's winning at a 72-win pace. Boston is the defending champion and the deserved favorite to win the title. Milwaukee feels like a threat to me as I'm watching New York before they run out of gas at the end of that game against Oklahoma City. They've played some really good basketball this year. I view them as a legitimate threat. They have some really impressive wins. Dallas is a team, even though they've been injured, I find them to be a team that's a legitimate threat. There's all these teams that could make a deal and make things interesting. A team like the Lakers, a team like Golden State, even teams like Houston and Memphis, to me, feel like if they get an upgrade at a certain spot, could go further in the postseason. Memphis may be able to do it without even making a deal. Memphis feels like a legitimate threat to the juggernauts to me. So, I agree. It feels open. In the Eastern Conference, knowing that there are four legitimately very good teams between Milwaukee, New York, Boston, and Cleveland, that makes me feel like there's a good chance we have a really nice end to that playoff run. Hopefully they don't all end up on the other side of the bracket than Boston like they did last year. Hopefully we see them a little bit more dispersed throughout that bracket, but that's going to be highly entertaining. And you could talk me into any one of those 4 teams getting out of the conference, even though I will be picking Boston. And then same thing goes for the West. It's just any given week, a team gets hot, they can move up the standings and look like a legitimate threat. There's a bunch of teams that are trade candidates in there. I agree. I think the NBA is sick. It feels wide open to me, especially in that Western Conference, because Oklahoma City can go through these like really bad shooting stretches. Like I view them as a team that could get upset. So like it just feels wide open. I agree that it's really good drama. What I'm secretly hoping for though is we had really rough conference finals and finals each of the last 2 seasons, not counting the Miami Heat coming back to beat the Boston Celtics, or excuse me, the Celtics almost coming back to beat the Miami Heat 2 years ago in that series that went 7 when Jason Tatum sprained his ankle. But like other than that, there was very little drama in the second half of the postseason in the last 2 years. I'm hoping that this is the year that we finally get a couple of really good conference final series and a really good NBA final series. Next question. Thoughts on Jimmy quiet quitting on the Heat? So there's a bunch of different fronts to go at this from. One is like what Jimmy's doing to Miami. And it's kind of sad to me because Jimmy was just such a good player for the Miami Heat for a long time and had kind of become a fan favorite. One of the scariest playoff players that anybody would run into in this league. Some real moments like upsetting Giannis in the 2020, the Bucks upsetting, or the Heat upsetting Giannis in the 2020 season, or like in the 2023 season when he's going on that like MJ-esque run to eliminate them in the first round, the trip to the finals, he had even had a pull-up 3 against the Celtics in Game 7 in 2022 that if he would have made, would have sent the Miami Heat to the finals. He just had a lot of big moments, right? And this just feels dirty. You know, I have another question right after this, kind of looking back to the Kyrie Irving debate, and I'm not going to get into it right now, but I think Kyrie Irving has been kind of like given this type of reputation in a way that I don't think he necessarily deserves. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Like, this is way worse. Jimmy's done this so many times now where like he's just decided he's unhappy. And his response is like, I'm just going to be a dick to everybody. Kyrie Irving made decisions for his career, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But like, this is not the first time that Jimmy Butler's been like, I'm unhappy. I'm just going to be mean to everybody until I get what I want. It's literally like a toddler. It's like dealing with a toddler. And it's just upsetting because, you know, I sympathize where he's coming from to a certain extent, in the sense that, okay, so Tyler Herro gets going this year, and Tyler Herro is now becoming their primary ball handler option instead of Jimmy Butler. But you should have known coming into this situation as a forward with a bunch of miles on his body with an injury history that's getting into his late 30s, while you're playing on a team with younger talent, that you might be kind of like transitioning to passing the baton a little bit. And part of aging gracefully in this league is identifying that and making the adjustment. A big part of what has made LeBron still so good as he is 40 damn years old is he's reinvented himself with like he is a screen and roll partner now in a lot of ways. He's doing a lot of stuff on the ball still, but like LeBron will just set screens for Austin Reeves all night if that's what the game plan calls for. And like, instead of transitioning into this like, okay, Tyler Herro's stepping up, this is good for our team. Let me lean into weaponizing my traits to help the team in every way that I can elsewhere, and know damn well that if the shit hits the fan and Tyler's not the right guy, if he doesn't have the right matchup, that they're going to lean on me. But instead, it's been quiet quitting. It's been pouting. It's been refusing to shoot the basketball or to be aggressive. It's been a bunch of stuff like that. And again, we don't know exactly what's transpired behind the scenes, but a 7-game suspension, the word conduct detrimental to the team, you're burning bridges on the way out. And it just is really sad because, again, this should have been an era of basketball. Jimmy Butler with the Miami Heat. This should have been an era of basketball that we looked back on in a positive light. And instead, it's going to be something negative. The second piece of this is like trying to find a place for Jimmy to go. And it's really difficult because, one, he makes $50 million. So you have to aggregate a bunch of salaries to go get him. 2, most of the teams that are in a position where they're desperate enough to get him have to be pretty deliberate about their trading process because they're usually a first apron team and they're not as flexible in their ability to like bring in additional salary and stuff like that, right? And he's a huge risk to chemistry. Because if it's not what he wants, who's to say he won't do what he did again? And just in general, we just have so many examples of him blowing things up when he's not happy. And so there are a couple teams I look at. Golden State's a team that you have to at least consider, right? Unfortunately, to put that sort of thing together, you have to include Andrew Wiggins, and Andrew Wiggins is playing really good basketball, so it's a tough call. I think that there's a case to be made that it would actually make them a little bit more volatile in the regular season potentially, which is why you want to wait until the deadline to make that deal if you can. But I like the idea of Jimmy Butler, Steph Curry, Draymond Green in a playoff series when things slow down and it's a rock fight and you just have three really damn good basketball players out there. But there's a lot of different machinations there you have to get through to get Miami to, like, why would Miami want to take on the money of Andrew Wiggins, for instance, when they could get off of Jimmy Butler's money potentially? Although there's a case to be made that Jimmy might even opt in this summer because of just how big that player option is. So like Golden State kind of feels like a flawed option to me. And like there's a case to be made that Golden State should just go after a guy like Cam Johnson instead. I'd like Cam Johnson, I think, is certainly the better regular season option. And but I think Jimmy Butler's certainly the better playoff option. So like that's not a great fit. I've heard Houston get mentioned. I don't necessarily disagree that that's a move that would instantly turn Houston into a truly dangerous team in the Western Conference. The problem that I'd have is like you got something special brewing down in Houston. You want to bring in that old, angry, like late 30s, just kind of malcontent in there and just see if he's going to just mess up everything you're trying to build. Like it's a risk. Same goes for Memphis. I've heard Memphis get mentioned as an option too. Memphis and Houston are two teams that in theory, if they were able to get Jimmy Butler and add them to everything that they're doing, it makes them much more serious teams, but it just comes with a lot of risk. And so my guess is that this is a deal that gets done at the deadline, if it gets done at all. And if it gets done, my guess is it'll be done by a desperate team that is in a position where they have to take on some risk. And I don't know who that's going to be, and we'll see. But my initial impression on it is I had some people complaining in the comments that I haven't talked about it yet. A big part is I can't even come up with a destination that really makes sense right now. And I don't think anything's going to happen until February. Because why would you, if you're Memphis or Houston, you're already winning regular season games. So why would you make that deal now? If you're going to make that deal, you're going to make it in February in all likelihood, right? And you're going to base it on how things look at that point in time. And Golden State as well. They're not going to want to gut their depth when they've got 20 games before the deadline. So not quite 20, probably 15, but you get the point. So that, I just don't see a ton of urgency around it. My real impression on the Jimmy thing is it's just sad. It's just sad that this era of what was kind of a fun era of Miami Heat basketball is ending like this. What's up, Jason? Love your show, man. 2-part mailbag for you. We can all remember the narrative around Kyrie Irving before and after he got traded to the Mavs. Many people were low on his ability to be serious and impact winning. He's obviously displayed otherwise in the year and a half since. Can you speak to why you think it's worked so well with the Mavs when it didn't necessarily with the Celtics Nets? What changed? Secondly, hypothetically, what sort of position would the Lakers be in right now if they had pulled the trigger on Kyrie like many people thought they would? Can you play out that hypothetical as you do? Thanks, man. Okay, so with Kyrie Irving, what bothered me about the Kyrie Irving trade saga to Dallas was the fact that trade request was so obviously very different than everything else that had happened. Like him wanting to leave Cleveland in 2018 didn't make any sense to me. It was based out of this weird vanity, I want to go have my own team kind of thing. And I think Kyrie found out pretty quickly that he's not good enough to have his own team and that he needs to play alongside a co-star. But that was something he needed to work through with the Cavs. And I think that there was some frustration with the team, with the way the team was covered, but that's stupid. He should have been able to see through that and know that just because people talk a certain way about LeBron doesn't mean that that's the way LeBron's treating you. You know what I mean? It was silly, but it is what it is. The thing with Boston, I think he just wanted to be able to choose his destination. I think every NBA player reaches a point eventually where they're like, I want to have some agency here. I want to have the ability to choose where I want to go. And so Boston wasn't a place he chose. And Boston fans can be very grating at times. Trust me, I deal with it in my comments all the time. Boston fans, I think Kyrie was just wanted a fresh start somewhere away from Boston, somewhere he could pick. So he goes to Brooklyn, right? And then in the Brooklyn situation, there was a lot of really questionable stuff that he did in terms of like no call, no showing from work, like leaving his team without communicating with the coaching staff, the stuff surrounding the COVID vaccinations. Like there was a bunch of stuff that he did during that time that just left his team hanging. And he deserved criticism for that. And all of the things that happened over that era made Kyrie seem like a flake. And for the record, that was an earned reputation at the time. But what happened when he wanted to leave to go to Dallas or to anywhere that ended up being Dallas was so straightforward. He wanted an extension. Brooklyn wasn't going to give it to him. If he went to free agency, his options were more limited. The trade market was the best opportunity for him to get to a good team where he can go to a fresh start and have an opportunity to sign an extension with the franchise that actually wanted him. Now, he deserved some blame for Brooklyn not wanting him anymore. That's completely fair. But Dallas, I thought, made a smart gamble. I said it at the time. I was like, this is Kyrie just wanting to find his next new deal. And I thought that through exploring the Boston thing and through exploring the Brooklyn thing, I thought it was a pretty worthwhile risk considering the things that Kyrie was hunting and trying to learn about himself, he had learned. And I thought he was ready to kind of settle down and be in one place for a little while and figure things out. And it was a brilliant gamble for Dallas, and they made it to the NBA Finals. And I view them once again as a top 5 championship contender this year. I thought it was the right move. Very, very different circumstances than the Jimmy Butler thing. The Jimmy Butler is like straight up has financial security. He's got another $50 million on the books for next year if he wants it, or he can opt out and renegotiate a new deal. That opt-in contract could be traded too in the future. If he doesn't get moved at this deadline, he becomes an automatic expiring the following year if he opts in. So like you could have that be traded and then he could sign a new deal. Jimmy wasn't under the urgency that Kyrie Irving was under to find a new destination for him to sign a new deal, especially when you factor in his age. The Jimmy situation is very different, in my opinion, than Kyrie's last trade request from Brooklyn. The second piece, hypothetically, what sort of position would the Lakers be in right now if they had pulled the trigger on Kyrie like many people thought they would? Can you play out that hypothetical as you do? I think they'd be in a better position. The thing that it would have been tricky because you would have had to send out Austin Reeves. And I really, really like Austin Reeves for the record. And I think he's a really good player. But I think Kyrie's better than Austin. I don't think that that's necessarily a hot take. And you can imagine a scenario where you have a Kyrie Irving, you have a Max Christie that you get in the draft, you draft well, you find some discounted pieces and you really, really emphasize defense and motor with the players that you surround those guys with. They could be pretty good. They'd have their own shortcomings because you have 3 max contracts, and anytime you build a payroll around 3 max salaries, you're going to end up with some shortcomings elsewhere. But like there are times where I think the Lakers could really use a more advanced perimeter scorer. That said, it's all hypothetical. We don't know how it would have gone with Kyrie with the Lakers, and Kyrie's been hurt a lot over the course of the 2 years too. And with the payroll like that and LeBron and AD without a lot of support around them, it could have been ugly during those stretches too. So it's hard to say, but like I don't remember exactly what I said around that time. I vaguely remember being optimistic about the Lakers, or not optimistic, but pro the Lakers making a Kyrie Irving trade, but I can't really remember my exact stance around that time. NFL playoffs? We're talking about NFL playoffs? You bet we are. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is key to winning in the NFL playoffs. And the key to you scoring big is betting on them. At DraftKings, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score 6. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Right now, the Kansas City Chiefs are favored to win the Super Bowl at plus 340, with the Lions right behind at plus 425. Here's another reason to watch your favorite players crush it in the playoffs. New customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big during the NFL playoffs with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Cavs question here. A lot of Cavs fans were asking me why I thought they hadn't played the Celtics yet. I obviously know they've played the Celtics. I've done video breakdowns. I did a full film breakdown on the last Celtics-Cavs game, so I don't know where they're getting that from. All I was saying is that in the 8-game winning streak, which I think is now 9, in the winning streak where they had won every game by double figures, they had not played Boston or Oklahoma City in that streak. That was literally all I was trying to say. Point being, in that streak though, they had played a lot of good teams. So what I was saying is like, this is a streak where they're playing a lot of good teams and winning every game by double figures. Maybe not the great teams, but they're playing all the good teams and they're winning by double figures. That was all I was trying to say. Anyway, here's our Cavs question. If the Cavs beat the Thunder one of two times, or dare I say both, are we the top team now? So I'm not sure if you guys missed this, Cavs fans, but in the video that we did earlier this week, I think on Thursday, I already view the Cavs as ahead of the Thunder right now. I think that their perimeter shooting is just so much more reliable than Oklahoma City's. I think when you look at shot creation, like going from Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and Evan Mobley as your primary shot creators to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, J-Dub, Chet Holmgren, I actually, based on the depth there, like Shai's obviously better than Donovan, but I think Darius is a more reliable shot creator with more experience. I think Evan Mobley and his growth is every bit as good of a third option right now in terms of creating offense as a guy like Chet. I think Chet's a better player because he's got a little bit higher defensive ceiling with his rim protection ability. But like, I think the shot creation is relatively even between the two teams, maybe a slight edge to Cleveland. And then Cleveland just has way more reliable shooting off of that. And then on the defensive end of the floor, like there are different types of teams. Like Oklahoma City has more good perimeter defense. But at the same time, Cleveland's been defending really, really well this year, and they've got that interior size piece, and that's what they're going to do if they were to face each other. Like if we got a Cavs Thunder finals, like you're going to see a lot of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley in the paint as the Cavs basically dare some of these Oklahoma City role players to shoot. So it's a small gap. I want to be clear. Like I have Cleveland above the Thunder by just a very small gap, but I do have them above them right now. And for the record, like if I believe the Cavs will beat the Thunder next week, we'll see what happens. They're at home. I think it's a good matchup for them too, but we'll see how it goes. Hey, Jason, in one of his recent podcasts, Kevin O'Connor was discussing the improvements Cade has made this season, but question whether or not he could develop into a number one scoring option. And if he can't, what does that mean for the Pistons? I believe Cade can become the best overall player on a championship level team, but not as the number one scorer. Instead, I see him as an overqualified number two who's more focused on setting teammates up, punishing mismatches, and being that switchable plus defender. My question is it essential in today's NBA for a franchise player to also be the number one scorer? The recent finals MVPs have all been number one scorers. However, I'd argue LeBron and Jokic didn't want to be that guy. It's just that they had to assume that role to win the title. Halliburton is another case study that I think this would apply to. Thanks as always for your content. Here's the thing. I don't think Cade has to be a number one scoring option to even be the best player on his team. I think that every basketball player brings a list of traits to the table. And ideally, you want your supporting stars to complement each other, right? So for instance, like I would want to put a really dominant scorer next to Cade just because that's the best way to complement a big playmaking forward. What has made LeBron the best in his life? A guy like Kyrie Irving next to him that can create his own shot. A guy like Dwayne Wade next to him who's a scoring guard, right? What has been the best Luka season this year? Kyrie Irving, in his career, Kyrie Irving next to him. The time he made it to Western Conference Finals, Jalen Brunson next to him, scoring guards that can help him. Like that doesn't mean that LeBron couldn't score. That doesn't mean that Luka couldn't score. It doesn't mean that Cade can't score. It's just a good complementary fit to have a scoring guard next to your big playmaking forward. It just depends on how fast Jaden Ivey's going to develop. Can Jaden Ivey develop into that type of player that can be that kind of support for Cade? And that's the kind of stuff, like, as I keep saying, like with the Pistons right now, it's a combination of experience. And then through the draft, I'd be looking at drafting off-ball talent, meaning like guys that can really score the basketball without needing plays run for them. Those are the kind of, like, I'd be looking for older wings that are like 3-4 year college guys and guys that are ready to play right away, that are in that like 6'7" to 6'9" phase that can shoot threes and drive closeouts. Those are the kinds of guys, upgrades of Malik Beasley, Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr. that are younger and cheaper. Those are the kinds of guys that I'd be looking at. Like right now, you have all these guys on rookie contracts, so you can afford to pay expensive vets, but you're going to have to extend all these dudes and put them on max extensions. When they're all on maxes, you're going to need to have discounted talent off of them. The way you get that discounted talent is through the draft. But it's again, you got to figure out whether or not Jaden Ivey's capable of being that number 2, and we're only going to find that out through time. And hopefully he gets healthy relatively soon. Can you please revisit your stance on why? Can you please revisit your stance that the West is way better than the East? Do you still feel that same way, considering that the East has now won 51% of the games versus West teams, and the NBA Cup has reorganized the schedule so that teams play a lot of in-conference games early on during group play? That means we're looking at an even smaller sample of East versus West games than we usually see this early in the year. So I don't know where you're getting that 51% number from. I pulled it up, and the West is they've played 142 games interconference play, and the West is 77-65, so 12 games over 500. It's a 54.2% win percentage. Not quite as high as last year, but still pretty high. And that number has dropped a little bit since the start of the season, as some teams in the middle of the East, teams like Atlanta and Milwaukee and Philly, have started to win some games. But like for the most part, the West has continued to be dominant throughout the year. That said, I do think Boston and Cleveland are the 2 best teams in the league right now. So for whatever that's worth, the top of the East is stronger than the top of the West. But I do think that the Western Conference is pretty clearly stronger, and they continue to demonstrate that throughout the season. Jason, you keep staying on this Kuminga trade train, even when Jonathan does exactly what is needed. 20 points, 5 assists, 5 boards, and a plus 25 game that his coach went out of his way to give props for. Dude, what is your problem with Kuminga? If you get Cam Johnson without getting Kuminga, that might work. This is a question this is an issue that I have that a lot of people, I think, miss just because I produce a lot of content. Like, I'm going to skip ahead for another question real quick. Jason, you make great, thoughtful content. I learned a lot from watching your videos. Some of your videos play, some watch your videos to play contrarian, and you seem to take it as such. However, some things you do actually show unmistakable bias. Please speak on the year Westbrook is having, because you've been extremely critical of him. This is the same type of example. I have multiple times this year talked about how great of a fit Russell Westbrook has been with Jokic. I specifically talked about how his ability to attack off of the 2-man game and actually draw Jokic's defender into the paint further, allowing for those drop-off passes, has weaponized the 2-man game again, especially during the phase when Jamal Murray was struggling. I've talked about Russell Westbrook positively many times this year. The thing is I do like 4 to 5 hours a week of brand new content. I had a whole segment earlier this week where I clarified, I'm not saying trade Kuminga just to trade Kuminga. I'm just saying if push comes to shove and you have an opportunity to upgrade the roster with a more reliable player, a player that has a higher floor, then yeah, you should probably include Kuminga. That's all I was saying. If you can go get Cam Johnson without trading Jonathan Kuminga, by all means, do it. If you can go get Jimmy Butler without trading Jonathan Kuminga, by all means, go. Do it. All I was saying is what ends up happening, and this is something that I've been riding this train with Warriors fans for the last 2 years now. Every time Jonathan Kuminga has a good game, everyone comes to me and talks about how amazing Jonathan Kuminga is and how he should never be traded. I have never disputed Jonathan Kuminga's ceiling. He's a freakishly talented young basketball player. He's one of the most athletically gifted players that we have in the league. Of course he's going to have really good games. He also has a really low floor because he's a young player who's very inconsistent, who struggles to replicate successes and struggles to get rid of mistakes that he makes. Very typical for a 22-year-old raw athletic forward. And I don't blame him for that at all. Most people his age get to go somewhere else and make mistakes and learn how to play basketball slowly. That's not the case. He's on a team with Steph Curry and Draymond Green. And despite some of the statistical performance, like the Warriors throughout the season have like the on-off numbers, the metrics that track how the team performs when Kuminga's on versus Kuminga's off, they're not good. Ideally, you don't want to rely on him. That's the point. You just don't want to rely on him. If you can keep him in-house and allow him to continue to grow while not needing him to be on the floor as one of your final 5 in a big playoff game, that's good. But if you're going to rely on him to be on the floor in a big playoff game, he's going to get lost off ball, lose track of his shooter, fail to help when he's supposed to, lose game plan discipline, and teams are going to sag way the hell off of him and dare him to shoot, and he might not be able to make shots. So yeah, if you have the opportunity to bring in a Jimmy Butler or a Cam Johnson, and the Nets or the Heat go, we need Jonathan Kuminga to make this deal work or we're not doing it, I would make the deal. Why? Because even though Jonathan Kuminga has a lot of potential, I do not see him as a foundational star, meaning I don't think he's the guy that you rebuild around. He's the guy that if you could have him for your rebuild, great. But if not, then it's not the end of the world. Like, I think this team is destined for tanking and being really bad for a few years, no matter what, when Steph retires. So, like, I just think by virtue of the fact that you're not going to have a player as good as Steph for a very long time, if you had the opportunity to give these guys a chance, maybe not even for this year, but for next year, like to bring in an asset that helps them rebuild around this core next year, then I think you got to do it. But yeah, like if you can make those sorts of upgrades without trading Kuminga, by all means do it. I think that's the right move. I'm not a big believer in just throwing assets away for nothing. It's just about the reality of their predicament. But again, as I said with the Westbrook thing, as I'm saying with this Kuminga thing, these are all things that I've said on the channel before. I don't blame you guys. I'm not. I produce too much content to just expect that all of you watch every single minute. I know that there's probably a very small percentage of you that actually watch every single show that I make. I'm sure most of you are like, they're talking about my favorite team today. Like I'll listen, right? Or like, oh, maybe I like power rankings days, or maybe I like mailbag days. I get that. Like, but I just have to let you guys know that these are things that I have said on the show before. What would it take for the Knicks to beat the Celtics if the two ended up in the Eastern Conference Finals? I'd have to not be scared about Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns being so easily attacked in the half court offensively. Once again, in the Oklahoma City game, every slowdown half court possession turned into Shai Gilgeous-Alexander attacking Cat and drop or Cat and Hedges and Brunson and Hedges, and just getting really good stuff out of it every time. When they'd hedge, they'd slip and get a 4-on-3. When they'd switch, then Shai would just attack Jalen and get right downhill and get to the rim. Karl Anthony Towns in a drop, Shai's hitting another mid-range jump shot. Like, they just attacking that too easily. And like, I mean, here's the thing. Mikal Bridges is playing better. The Knicks offense is better. A lot of things are better about the Knicks since the opening night catastrophe in Boston. A lot of things are better. But one thing is the same, and that is they have this Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns half-court defense thing. And like, I think there's a couple of different things they can look at. One, like, blitzing instead of hedging, because they're just giving up 4-on-3s too easily anyway, so they need to be a little bit more aggressive to maybe get more deflections, maybe force more turnovers. And then trusting the switch with more help. Like on the play where Jalen Brunson got switched onto Shai just went right around him and he didn't get into any traffic. And so they just need to have a better plan as a team for how to deal with teams that want to attack Jalen and Cat in space. All right, 3 more questions. Big believer in Golden State, okay, yet you gave up on the Lakers so fast and asked for their rebuild after 2 bad games. And you went on to keep repeating that you're skeptical about the Lakers only. No other team to be skeptical about. God forbid the Warriors. It's still all good. I just hope you stay on that side for the time being. But unfortunately, you will come around and get back to the Lakers when they have proved that they are a serious team. Too bad if you didn't believe in someone when it was hard and you didn't come back when it's all good. You should declare yourself a Warriors fan, or at least a Steph fan. Or you can go for an Anthony Edwards fan. You've shown more faith in each one of them than the Lakers. You should at least stay the course and not revert to the Lakers at some point. I mentioned this in yesterday's show, but there's a huge difference in the Lakers and the Warriors. The Lakers are playing good basketball right now, but they probably, like, they're 20-14. I'd argue they've underachieved a little bit. I said before the season I viewed them as a 50-win team if LeBron and AD stayed healthy, and they've stayed healthy. There have been a lot of games this year that they should have won that they lost because of poor execution, poor effort, straight up quitting on some cases. They're 20-14 because they have a pretty solid roster. It's not a top tier roster, but it's a solid yet flawed roster. Golden State, that roster is devoid of top end talent other than Steph Curry. They have attacked this regular season. They have been diligent. They have overachieved relative to coming into the season. Most of us viewed Golden State as a fringe play-in team, like as a complete non-threat. And then they came out the gates 12-3 before some of their talent realities and some of their guys broke down and they started to get worn down. My frustration with the Lakers was, in order for the Lakers to win the title, they have to be incredibly sharp from day one to the end of the season. I talked about it all summer. It was the entire reason why I supported the Darvin Ham firing and the JJ Redick hiring. I was like, These guys need a psycho that will hold them accountable, that will help them attack the regular season every day so that they can get to April sharp enough to be the best version of themselves, because they're not talented enough to win on the strength of their talent. They have to be the best possible basketball team that they can be. And then when I watched them go 2-5 and then roll up into Miami and quit in the first quarter of a game, I was like, these guys aren't serious about the work. Very different than Golden State. Golden State has been serious about the work all season. That is a rock-solid organization with great leaders that has been attacking things through and through. They have a talent issue. So I'm excited about the Warriors as a long shot championship contender if they make a talent upgrade, because I know they're about the right stuff. Now, for the record, the Lakers have been a very serious team since that devastating loss in overtime against Atlanta. I said this on the show yesterday. This stretch, what is it? What are they like? I think 9-3 or 8-3 in their last 11 games, something like that. 7-2 in their last 9. In this stretch, they have been playing very serious basketball. Whatever embarrassment they ran into in that Miami Heat situation, they've responded to it, to their credit. And like, as I look at the Lakers moving forward, I'm skeptical still because it's only been a few weeks. But like, yeah, if they maintain this throughout the season, they will clearly demonstrate like, hey, that group of guys that we looked like back in late November, early December, that's not us. This is us. Why? Here's 50 games showing you why, not 11, right? Like, that's what I want to see before I get back into really believing in what the Lakers can do. That plus an upgrade at the deadline through the trade market, particularly of the 2 spot. If that sort of thing happens, then I will believe in the Lakers again as a team that can win. Everything is relative. We're always talking about these things relative. So for instance, like, why are you like, you have this like optimism surrounding the Warriors? I think the Warriors are a long shot. I've never once said this year that the Warriors are a top tier championship contender. I don't view them as a top tier championship contender. Everyone's getting discussed relative to their expectations. The Warriors have overachieved at many points this year. The Warriors seem to me like a team that if you bring in offensive firepower, it could slot a lot of things and make things easier. Maybe they could go from being a team that we all thought was like a complete non-threat at the bottom of the West to a team that's in the middle tier in the West who knows, maybe they can win a couple playoff series, find themselves in the Western Conference Finals. Now you have Steph Curry, anything can happen. That's the way I'm discussing them. Just like if I discuss Cleveland, Boston, Oklahoma City, we know they're going to be top seeds. We know they're going to win at least 1 playoff round. They're probably going to win 2 playoff rounds. These are teams that now I'm discussing them through the context of like, this team has an extremely high likelihood of playing very high leverage games at the end of the season. Let's talk about their pros and cons. It's boring for me to just sit here and say Oklahoma City, Boston, and Cleveland are great all day long. We got to talk about like those dudes are going to be in some high leverage games. We got to talk about their strengths and weaknesses. These long shot teams, you just are trying to put yourself in a position where maybe something can happen. The Lakers are somewhere in between that, right? They're closer from a talent standpoint, but they've been more inconsistent in their execution, and so much hinges on what kind of deal they make, and they're more likely to make a deal. Because they're just in a position where they're like, they don't need to go get a star necessarily. They just are looking for a good role player or two. The Warriors are looking for a high-level offensive player. So it's a little bit more of a precarious type of situation. But again, there's the fundamental difference between the Lakers and the Warriors and the way I've discussed them this year. The Warriors have a talent issue, not a championship character issue, like a basketball character issue. The Lakers had a basketball character issue earlier in the season. I hated watching them. After the first 3 games of the year, they relaxed. Now, I am very encouraged by this recent couple of weeks. And okay, so like this is the inevitable question that's going to come. Okay, Jason, you said that you were out on the Lakers. And you said that they should blow things up. Had LeBron and AD maintained the bullshit level of focus they had during that stretch, they should have blown it up. They responded, to their credit. Like a lot of times we don't account for new information in the way that can change a take. I was talking about this with Tatum yesterday. It's like Tatum wasn't the same player last year. So yeah, even if you disagreed with me about my player rankings, you have to at least admit He's a different player this year than he was last year. I talked about this yesterday. He's having the best jump shooting season he's had in 5 years. He's combining the Swiss Army knife forward that he has been in recent years with the elite jump shooter that he was in the early part of his career. I had someone in the comments go like, he shot this well last year. No, he didn't. Statistically, he did not. And he was awful in the postseason. So like, again, it's one of those things where we have new information here. The Lakers looked like they were literally crumbling and falling apart at the seams less than a quarter of the way through the season, quitting. And they quit in the first shift against Miami. Right after they quit in the second half against Phoenix, right after they quit in the second half against Denver. Like straight up, let go of the rope, let them run us out of the gym. So when I'm watching in the Miami game and they're 2-5 in their last 7 games, and they desperately need one, and this is a bad Miami team that just lost 2 in a row, and you're in a spot where you can rectify things, and like AD's just like letting Bam drive right around him. And that was like the first game where LeBron started to play better, but other than LeBron, everybody just looked dead that night. Like they just didn't care. I'm sitting here like, okay, you're not good enough to win the title from a talent standpoint. You have to be the best possible version of yourselves as a basketball team. And these guys don't look like they want to do the work. Now, for an 11-game span or whatever it's been, they look like they want to do the work. Let's say that stretches through the end of the season. Okay, they do win 50-something games. They do make some sort of upgrade at the deadline. They do stay focused throughout the rest of the year. I'll just say I was wrong. But I won't say wrong in the terms of like how I felt in the moment. How I felt in that moment, it's the way all Lakers fans felt. Maybe not being done with the team necessarily, but all of us were like, what the hell, guys? What are you doing? Why are you quitting in the first half against a bad team? So like, again, I will admit that I just gave up on them too early if that was the case. I'll freely, do you guys think I care about being wrong? I have opinions for a living. It's like the Tatum thing. I've been wrong many times on this show. I talk 4 to 5 hours a week. There are plenty of opportunities where I'm going to be like, I have this strong opinion. Oh, it turns out I was wrong. If it turns out I was wrong about the Lakers, I'll say I was wrong about the Lakers. I will tell you guys, though, I need more than just a few good weeks before I buy back in on this team with how scarred I am from the way that they treated that early part of the season where it just seemed like they didn't care about being the best version of themselves. Hey, Jason, love the show. What do you think of Josh Green and Nick Richards from the Hornets to the Lakers for Gabe Vincent, Jalen Hood-Schifino, and Christian Wood? I'd like to know your thoughts on the fit/potential of that roster after the trade. Appreciate your work on the show and hope you keep it up. Josh Green is actually a really interesting option as like there's a lot of Lakers fans that are anti-benching Max Christie, right? So like when I say like, let's go get Bruce Brown, there's a lot of Lakers fans who are like, oh, well, Max Christie's a better shooter. Max Christie just had 20-something points in a game. Like we should go with Max Christie. And like my thing with that is like, I don't want to be relying on a very young guard who doesn't have any playoff experience when we get into a big spot. And I'd rather rely on Bruce Brown, who's a champion, who's literally played a substantial role at the same position for a championship team and done it for 4 rounds, right? So like, that's why I was like talking about that type of upgrade. But let's say you're like, okay, we need to come up with an option where maybe we don't depend on Max in a big spot, but we also keep Max in the starting lineup so he gets tons of reps and we can ride out Max's good games. Because ideally that's what you want. If you're saying that Max's shooting is an upside and you think Max's ceiling is higher than some of these other guys, then okay, another option would be Max keeps starting. Max plays every time he's in a big game, but he's playing well. You just ride it out and let him play. But hey, I would like to have a veteran option at the same position that's not as small as Gabe Vincent, not as bad of a shooter as Cam Reddish, but like a guy that you can put into that spot that's like a really high floor option. A guy that's like a good defender, good shooter, good closeout attacker, good size. Maybe not the guy who's going to go for 25 on any given night, but the guy that's not going to have the absolute nightmare game that you can count on doing your job. Josh Green is a great example of that. He's got good size. He's a 40% three-point shooter. He's played in big playoff games. He's a good athlete. He's got like kind of a trunky, like fire hydrant kind of build to him, which is my favorite type of guard archetype. If you have him, you can play him in a bench role. You can basically get the deal done for like Gabe Vincent in one of the minimum contracts, right? So you send out Gabe Vincent, and instead you have Josh Green. And then basically the idea there is Josh Green is your bench guard. And on the nights when Max isn't a better option, or Max isn't as focused as he needs to be, or he's losing his confidence, let's go with Josh Green. That's really my thing, is like, I just don't want to depend on Rui, and I don't want to depend on Max. Dorian Finney-Smith is the higher floor, lower ceiling version of Rui Hachimura. A guy like Josh Green would be the higher floor, lower ceiling version of Max. There might be games where it's like, dude, Rui's bullying everybody under the basket and he's hitting all his threes. We don't need to use Dorian Finney-Smith much. We can play Rui 35 minutes tonight, right? Or the same thing goes for Max Christie, but then you have those options, Dorian and a guy like Josh Green. Hey, Rui's losing shooters and not paying attention, and just not hitting shots, and he just looks like this is not the right game for him. Okay, well, here comes Dorian Finney-Smith. Same thing goes for Max. Here comes a guy like Josh Green. I really like that option. The backup centerpiece, again, I just, when I look at how well Christian Koloko has been playing, I just don't believe in using assets on a backup center. So yeah, if you can get a guy that is discounted, sure, whatever. But like I you know how I am with backup centers. I've been talking about this forever. I just don't necessarily see it as a big enough deal. Like we just watched the Lakers get a win without Anthony Davis. So like I am not as intent on tracking down a backup center as everyone else is. That's not to say you don't do it if it's an easy, like I've seen some people talk about like, well, what if you just go get Kessler Edwards without any like you could get Kessler Edwards with like, I think it's like Jalen Hood-Schifino and one first round pick. Yeah, sure. If you want to do something like that and you don't want to use that first round pick on something else, that's one thing. But like I don't want to be like sending out good wings for a backup center. That to me just feels like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Last question. What is your note-taking process while watching games to prepare for the videos? Interested to see your thought process and mindset, especially compared to how a casual fan would think about certain plays. So basically it's so funny. I remember talking to Ethan Strauss about this the first time I went on his show, but like the way that I've always looked at my show is like, I've always been obsessed with like the story of basketball games. That's why I do more like instant reaction content than big picture content compared to some other people who are in this space. I love instant reaction content because I think basketball games are very fascinating. Like the journey of games, the way things start, the runs that are made, the way things close, right? And, one of the originating things for, how I kind of started doing this for a living is like, I used to sit with my buddies after a pickup game or after a men's league game or after watching a game, and we'd just talk about how the game went. Now, we did this really well. Yeah, remember when you and like there was a game we played the Air Force Base team. We scrimmage. I play with a group of guys that are just all kind of like mid-30s type of dudes that all played in college or played professionally overseas, stuff like that. And we scrimmage against JUCOs, Air Force Base teams, other club teams, things along those lines, just for fun. It's just a way for us to stay attached to the game, right? And like, there was a game where we played an Air Force Base team and like me and one of my buddies like spammed this 2-man game like over and over again in the second half and just cooked them with this exact same action. Basically like a kind of like a ghost screen action with another wing player. And it's like, we sat on the sideline after the game and was like, hell yeah. Like we were killing him with that, or like, you discuss a defensive thing that you did. Like, oh, when we switched that matchup, we got way better. Like we had a money tournament where we ended up in the double elimination round and we lost the first game. And so we had to go back and we had to beat them twice to win the money. And we made an adjustment where like, I was guarding this like big 6'10", like forward who could really shoot the ball. And he was hitting some shots over the top of me. Like I was playing like perfect defense and getting good contests. And the dude was just hitting shots. And then my buddy Kalen was guarding a kind of a bully ball wing. And Kalen's really lanky. He's about an inch taller than me and he's a better athlete, but he's about 25, 30 pounds lighter. And he was guarding this big bully ball forward and that dude was just going through him all game long. And so both of us were struggling with our defensive matchups. When we got back to play them again to have our chance to beat them twice to win the money, we switched. I guarded the bigger forward. he guarded the lankier wing. He locked his ass up. I locked the other dude's ass up, and we won the money. And we spent a bunch of time after the game just like sitting on the sidelines while we can barely walk because we played 6 games in one day. And we're talking about how we did this thing that helped us regain control of a situation that was going out of control. I've always been obsessed with the individual basketball games in the way that they are won and the way that they are lost. And so what I inevitably end up doing when I'm watching these NBA games is I just have my notes open and I just watch. And as I'm watching, if I see a trend like, hey, they're doing damage because of this matchup, they're doing damage because of that matchup, they're doing damage because of this schematic thing, they're doing damage because of this schematic adjustment, I'll just make a note of it. And so I kind of just have bullet points. And I do it by player and team. So I'll have like the team and then I'll have the players and I'll just list bullet points. So like, for instance, I'll put like, oh, Mikal Bridges is doing some damage to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the post. And then he just did it to Isaiah Joe too. So like Mikal Bridges is punishing some of these Oklahoma City guards in the post. I'll just like put that in the notes. And then it'll be like, oh, the Knicks are running a pretty deep drop with Cat. So there's going to be quite a lot of, Jalen and Shai needing to hit mid-range jump shots. And I'll just kind of like make that a note, and then I'll basically just make notes throughout the game. And it's kind of like a shit show. And then when I'm done watching the game, I go back to my notes and I try to organize it in a way that helps me kind of tell the story of the game, if that makes sense. But basically that's the point. So like I do like rough notes and then I refine my notes and then I go from there. But essentially I'm always just obsessed with like the story of basketball games. That to me is one of my favorite things to talk about on the show. And that's why we do the instant reaction content that we do. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you for supporting me and supporting the show. Again, I may do a show depending on how things go as I'm packing for the ski trip tomorrow morning. But I will absolutely be back to work next week in the middle of the week, either on Tuesday night or Wednesday, depending on when I get back from my ski trip. But we have a jam-packed slate on that Tuesday night. We have Lakers Mavs, and we have our first Nuggets Celtics matchup of the season. So we'll be getting into that as well as some power rankings and stuff. Either on, I'll probably do the power rankings for sure on Wednesday, but we may or may not do an instant reaction on Tuesday, depending on when I get back. I'll let you guys know. Just keep tabs on my Twitter feed, and I'll let you guys know how things go. Again, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting me and supporting the show. If I don't see you tomorrow, then I will see you in the middle of next week. See you guys then.